everybody, and welcome to How to Leverage Grants to Build Your Business or Cause. Now, Karen, can you see this yet? Okay, I better put screen share on, hadn't I? Okay. Okay, folks. So are you seeing the big screen with just the slide? Okay, so welcome everybody to how to leverage grants to build your business or cause. And you may be wondering what this is all about. All right, let's start with an idea. We've all got these ideas, these grandiose ideas about something, some change we want to happen. If you're in business, it might be some to help your business to grow or change direction. If you're in the community space, then there's a cause out there. There's some vision, some intention that you're wanting to achieve. And it starts with that idea. Now, on the concept of leveraging, I just wanted to use in this presentation some examples of the kind of work that we've done. Yes, we do work in the grant space and we also work in the tender space, but other people do as well. So what makes us different? Well, I'm going to show you how, using these examples in this presentation, of growing from a zero, organizations from a zero grant funding at the time to $1 million in grants in 18 months. And actually what happened there is we did it for two at the same time and didn't realize that until I was having a conversation about one of them, and somebody else said, oh, that was us. And when I looked and I thought, aha, you did as well, but we just didn't realize. The second was how to take an idea of a small idea, and that's the idea of that seed here, and then through a series of grants, the journey that we took for it to truly become a $1 million project. And the third example is we're going to show you, even if you've just got an idea and you may be brand new to the game, you can still not just get a grant, but you can actually go as far as having a photo opportunity. So I'll give you an example of how we did that. And then the fourth idea, the fourth concept we're bringing in here is what we're doing at the moment, and we have been doing for some time, is helping organizations or people with an idea how to set up a charity, helping them to set up a charity with either deductible gift recipient status, or they may be a health promotion charity, to help them to put all the figures in place, all the ducks in place, to help them to leverage additional funding, not just standard grants from government departments, etc., but also from philanthropic trusts, because of what their cause is so emotive and so effective and so needs driven that they would qualify. So we help them, and we've actually found charities that have been set up with the wrong categories in the first place. And we've helped them because of what they're doing. And it may be that when they started out, they had this grand idea of what they wanted to achieve, but they didn't actually realize the benevolence and the support of the people who really needed their support. So the direction that their charity has gone in has been in a different direction to what they originally thought it would be. So we work with them to realign their charity status to their purpose, which might not be aligned to what they're currently doing. So just to give you as an example of of the kind of work that we've been doing, and using these examples to show you how we have managed to leverage grants to help out with their business or their cause. Okay, so just quickly about me. As you can tell from my accent, I'm from the north of England, a place called Bradford. We've sort of like the majestic city hall there. Yorkshire Rose. We always like to say that we come from Yorkshire, not the UK, because people come from Yorkshire believing that we are God's own county. The European Union, I spent about 9-10 years in a role that was very much based on how to get money out of the European Union. I've written a book called The Intuitive Marketer, which actually takes me through my journey in life, and how it runs parallel to the development of technology, as well as marketing advice, etc., based on real life examples. In my previous lifetime, in the role working with the European Union, we used to organise conferences and professional development programs. Professional development programs used to run 4, 6, 8 times on one promotion cycle. And the conferences, we would get people from about 13 countries, no problem. And in the bottom corner, I just like to show there, that's a bit of a derelict building. But in its heyday, it was a really good example of business and working in a company where the culture was such that was very supportive, very patriarchal, but it also had a very good social system in it. And that set me up with my whole idea of community and concepts like that for the rest of my life, basically. All right, so let's go through this now. It's got a bit of a hodgepodge of ideas, but it's really taken from my experience. I've worked directly with the customer interface, with the community interface, with business interface since 2020. Before that, since 2010, not 2020, 2010. Before that, I was in a government department, which was main focus around funding. I was in a hybrid of the department. So I've been on that side of the fence as well as this side of the fence. And as I said, mentioned back in the UK, I also worked on attracting funding out of the European Union. And also I set up a multi-million pound training fund 20 odd years ago. So just multiply that. It was quite big and still is in context. Right, so let's start with, actually, I know if you're going to leverage grants, you have to be very clear what a grant is. And it's a contract to achieve agreed outcomes with the funder. In that contract, you may have actually proposed to them how you're going to deliver, what the milestones are, and the price, etc. So a grant is a contract. It's a non-refundable contribution most of the time. The last thing a funder wants is to have to return anybody to have to return funds they've already received, because when they return funds, there's no guarantee it goes back to where it came from. It could go somewhere else in the system. And also, if you return funds, you've sort of admitted a bit of defeat here. So it is a non-refundable contribution. It's not like going to the bank and having to pay interest and pay the whole money back. So that's the benefit of it. It's a one-off. You can't apply for the grant for the same thing on more than one occasion, because it's a project base. And it's not just a project, it's got to be new, or it's got to be a change of direction. So again, if you've got these causes build a cause, you've got, think about it strategically. What's step one? What's the next step we want to achieve? Then the next step, then the next step. So in effect, you're building, each time you're doing it, you're actually changing it. So it's an innovation each time. So that helps to build your cause over a period of 5 or 6 different grants if you're lucky. But when you do get a grant, you are accountable to spend the money as you said you would. You can't just put it into your coffers. And unfortunately, I've come across that where people have thought that the money just goes into the coffers, or there's a huge amount taken out for overhead and very little actually for running the project itself. So just be mindful that you have to do what you say you will, and in using the funds that you say you've got. And it's always related, not always, it tends to be related to a policy or higher level plan. And again, if you are going to be building your business or building your position in the community in a certain area, it could be that you're looking into the 5 or 10 year window ahead of you. And to do that, you will be looking for any mention of a policy direction or a high-level plan, a strategic plan. If you're in business, there are regional economic development strategy plans across Australia. You can look in to see, what their priorities. If it's to do with the circular economy, with sustainability, there are 10-year plans out there, not just for the federal government, but in each state. Whether you're business or not for profit, you can tap into that to see the direction that the government is going, and you can plan what you want to achieve or what you think is going to happen in the next 3-5 years, and draw down grant opportunities as they come along. So thinking strategically about the kind of grants that are out there related to some high level policy directions. So there's still COVID-19 grants still available for the reparation after COVID-19. I'm just thinking here of the aged care industry, for example, where staff may still have to take time out when they're tested positive. Then there's the bushfires and the floods. At the moment, there's floods. So there's always sort of funding available when there's some kind of high-level disaster, so some significant event. So yes, you can. When it comes to those significant events, the next step is preparation for the next. So resilience, these are keywords like resilience and preparation. And so if you can tap into the thinking, that's when you can plan what your next venture is going to be. Even working in the government department, I used to really enjoy when the next plan would come out, because they come out every 3 to 5 years. And even in that department, it was like, oh, let's have a look what the opportunities are here. And then my role for what I was doing was to build the capability of the 43 funders agencies that we funded, to build their capability so that when the opportunity came, because it was mentioned in the big plan, that they were ready to apply for funding. So that is what I used to do. I used to build the capability of organizations to be able to grab the funding when it was available because they'd planned for it. And it always related to what they were doing out there. So back in mid-2005, something like that, it was a focus towards men working in adult education and men's learning. So I was building the capability of and getting organizations to think about what the needs of men 45 plus. So that's the sort of thing I was doing. So that's what a grant is. No matter where you're doing it, it's a contract. It's a non-refundable contribution as long as you're doing things right. It's one-off. It's project-based. You are accountable, and if you can find a higher level plan, that can open up the window of opportunity, not just for this grant, but for future opportunities as well. It can be used for things like equipment. It can be used for capital works. There's some multicultural infrastructure grants open in Victoria at the moment. There are community grants open, infrastructure grants open in New South Wales. Sports grants or infrastructure grants in New South Wales as well. Can be used for capacity building, so how to build the capability of your own organisation inside. For businesses, that could be planning. There's some leadership programs, etc. There's quite a few sort of areas you can be looking at. And then I call economic, social, cultural, environmental impacts. What I mean is, if you can make a change sort of economically, so you can get people into employment, for example, or you're engaging volunteers, even though it's there, or you can grow industry, that's an economic impact. It's going to have a positive impact in the future. Social, mental health, helping disadvantaged, learning, all those come into the social side of things. Culture, arts, or even multicultural festival traditions, etc. And then environmental impacts. So I always just say, if you can fit a grant into any of those 4 areas, there's going to be something somewhere. Your idea is going to fit somewhere. So that's just basically an overview here. Just just for those who don't know. And then look through the keys, and I'm going to draw down on some of these examples to show you a really, really substantial evidence of standing out success is a grant where you can actually, an application where you can actually demonstrate the evidence base. And you're looking for new data. If you can demonstrate some new data, that's going to help your course, as long as it's we call it evidence-based. There is actually some sort of sound principles behind the data you're collecting. Evidence of need. Again, I'm going to go into an example of evidence of need, and now that can really help your application. Value for money, and that doesn't mean the cheapest price. In fact, working in a government entity, if the price comes in too cheap, then we would know that it's not going to work because of the just the capability of the project and to be able to deliver the deliverables with the amount of money. Yes, you can have volunteers, but the bigger the project, the greater the risk. And evidence of experience and expertise. And again, I'm going to come into an example of using how that actually helped us, because I've got a couple of little surprises of the results that we've got in the next couple of slides. Okay, this is an interesting one. This was actually a multicultural group. The example I'm going to use. Now, they did have a previous grants history, but at the time that I started to work with them, they didn't. Okay, they didn't have the funding. But the previous projects that they did was a 2-3 year plan. It was going out there and it was helping older people in the community link with services, and they relied extremely heavily on volunteers. Now, volunteers are great for a short-term sort of solution, but if you're working over a period of 2 or 3 years, volunteers get tired, volunteers lose interest. The project had paid for a sort of low-level staffing, not quite full-time. So it's a good example of going out there and pitching, in that value for money and getting accepted in a project that's not going to succeed because the resources are not committed. So what I did, because a new opportunity came, and I said to them, they wanted to apply. And I said, this time round, do you know who else is going to be applying to the same bucket? And I showed them that the people going to be applying were actually high-level community organizations, the ones that would, have got multiple staff, multiple overheads, etc. So any application they would be putting in would be for some serious money. So I had to get these people to say, let's say, look, if you're going to do something like this again, different concept, but same idea, how would you do it differently? So yeah, we would have professional staff. Okay, maybe 3 or 4 staff, not 2 part-times. So we wouldn't have it totally reliant on volunteers. We would need to lease cars, because before that they'd been relying on petrol money and reimbursing for fuel. So we started to get them to think about how would that look? And so what happened then is we started to look at, what would this mean? So we put together an application. So in the previous 3 years before that, they'd apply for, the project was probably about $137,000. This time they applied, they actually got $750,000. Simply, and that actually set them up to do what they wanted to do with the resources that they now had available, simply by changing their mindset, looking out there who else is likely to get funded, and pay what the going rate was. which was great. Now that was just, I mean, that helped them sort of take that, $750,000 out of $1 million is 250,000. So we actually also worked on other projects, but what we did was we put together a strategic plan. And the strategic plan actually helped to generate the income because it showed, because there'd been some research to determine what their priorities were, we were able to use it. So we were able to use the strategic plan to help to leverage more funding. So in a period of 18 months, this organization did go from nothing to 18 to $1 million. Now, that was great. Word of warning, if you're going to do that, what they didn't do, because it was so fast, and I would say next time, be warned, is one, it led to a change in culture. Because it's a volunteer, sort of ethnic sort of organization, bringing in professionals. They sort of didn't plan for the changing culture, changing governance, changing the committee board, and the more responsibilities to the board. And also the policies and procedures needed changing because now they were employing serious staff. So that HR policies and procedures needed to be updated and things like that. So again, it's a great idea. We could work with them, but you need in the background to make sure that you've got the framework in place that will support a rapid growth. Policies and procedures there. Now, the other organization that went through a similar change, they actually had somebody at the helm who was strong in governance, and therefore it was quite a sort of $50,000, $100,000 grants as opposed to one great big one. So they did it incrementally. So if you can actually bring in a lot of money if you've got a cause that's going to sort of attract the funding. But when you do it, first of all, you've got to be in the right mindset and have the right support structures in place. Okay, I'm going to talk about the $1 million project here. And this was an interesting one because it started out as just like a $10,000 project, the lower level project, but it had a great aim. It was working with people in social housing in an area that was undergoing gentrification. And so they had this sort of starting helping with the mothers and the children. And then that was a 10,000. Then they went to a $50,000 application. And then came up an opportunity back in about 2013, 2014, a federal grant in the area of, I don't know, actually the word federal, I can't remember what it was now. But it was a grant that they were applied for $250,000. Now, because they weren't sure whether in this particular bucket, because they knew what they wanted to do, they were very, very passionate, and that's what's behind every cause is passion. They weren't quite sure how, whether they'd get that over the line. So we spent a lot of time actually throwing everything into the application that we could. Evidence of need. And we compared, this metropolitan area with somewhere else in the country. It was metropolitan that had been through similar circumstances, demographic data, health data. We threw everything at it. And it turned out that, we couldn't have done any more if we tried. And then another one of the questions was, what's your experience and capacity to deliver? And going back a couple of slides, we talked about capacity and evidence of need. And this is why I'm bringing this up, is again, it was actually two organizations working together for this one. And we didn't actually know how, how it would be taken. So we literally threw every bit of experience that we could. Now, this was a neighborhood house. So it wasn't a great big organization, it was a neighborhood house. And they actually, as I said, they threw everything at it. And lo and behold, when they did get funded, but they actually got a letter from the funder, basically congratulating them on the strength of those two questions, strength of response, and also they actually got more than they applied for. Now, I've seen that in the past in other examples where for whatever reasons, how the funding formula works, if there's a little bit of excess funding somewhere, if there's something that stands out as an exemplar, could be taken as a demonstration project, sometimes there's more money in the bucket that can go to that, that can get funded. So it is possible to get more than you ask for under some circumstances, and this is what happened with this one. And then when that funding came to an end, actually somebody else in the community decided to fund them because as a continuation, and then eventually they ended up we sort of over time it was $1 million, and then they partnered with a larger community organization and got a contribution of an addition, their share of an additional $1 million. So this was an example of the fact that you can have an idea and you can start to grow it, and as it evolves you can find more funding, and by the time that you've finished you could actually over time have $1 million project. And in this case, the organization I'm still working with, and we're still working sort of in the next mutation. So it's gradual growth. We had a very sound evidence base, which brought in 60% more funding. They did always built on evaluation, so they always evaluated the sort of contact, engagement, and outcomes of the projects that they've been working on, going back to the community, going back to participants and getting their feedback. And then they said, as they grew bigger and bigger, they developed more community partnerships. And they said that final iteration, I give an example, is they went into a larger partnership to basically even almost double. So that's an example of the fact that you can take an idea, a small idea, and over time you can build it, and so we've proved it. Yeah, this is an example here of, sometimes if you're the first time out there for funding, and sometimes I'd say to somebody, maybe you should try, just put your toe in the water just to see how it would go. That's usually what happens in the philanthropic area. But this was actually an organization that was almost brand new, first time out for the grant. They were looking at a contemporary problem at the time, which was to do with African youth. So that was a community-based issue, and they were, where do we start here? Now they could have gone to the community leaders, but in the short time frame that you have for the grant application process, it wasn't, there just wasn't enough time. You can understand how politics works and all the rest of it. So it wasn't really going to work for them straight out of the ranks, so to speak. So what we did was put together a series of questions and went straight to the youth. Now, so I'm not going to say how we did that, but he did manage to get to the young people. And I remember one day I was actually sort of an evening, I was in a motel. He and his wife came to see me. He threw the book at me, literally threw the book at me, and said, "See what you can do with that." And it was literally 267 of responses. So we collected that data, and that data then it was presented as part of the application for the funding. So it was a strong evidence base of the need coming straight from the clientele that he was wishing to support. And so it got funded. And as you say, look, there at the time, that was the multicultural minister at the time. So a proud organization, proud check. It was the $40,000. It wasn't rocket stations, but actually for the multicultural, that was pretty good. So yeah, that's an example. Sometimes it's thinking outside the box. Data is something, straight from the grassroots data always helps your case. So again, how do you collect that data is important, and how you can use it. So okay. Now, for people who are listening to this who are actually in a business context, and this is what I say to business people, is they may not be able to apply or eligible to apply for a grant, but their client might be. So it could be a business working that's got clients who are not-for-profits. So they could, the not-for-profits could apply for capacity building projects to engage professional business experts. So I was looking at this the other way around as a business expert, saying, go back to your client base, seeing how many of them, for example, are not-for-profits, what capacity needs they have, and how you can help them and how they can apply for a grant. So that's helping to grow the business side of the business, so to speak. Or if you're a not-for-profit or etc., or you're in a community group, and that's happening currently at the moment because of the festival grants that are open in Victoria. Many of the groups that are thinking of applying are not set up as entities. A grant has got to be between two legal entities. And the legal entity could be the government or philanthropic or whatever, and an incorporated association, a public company limited by guarantee on the other, or a business, depending what the eligibility is. But if you don't fall in that, you may need to be auspiced, which means that whoever is going to another organization, an organization that's an entity that's incorporated, for example, is going to take legal responsibility. So if you've got a great idea, but you haven't got it set up yet as a structure for yourself, for your grouping, you may just want to tie into somebody else, an auspice. Or it could be that the grants, for instance, sports grants are open at the moment in Victoria, infrastructure, but they can only be applied for by local government. So you may need to partner with local government if you're a sports entity to be able to draw down funding for infrastructure. So that's an idea of a partnership. So don't ever let the fact that you can't apply for a grant because you're not eligible in your own right put you off 100%. There may be a different way of looking at it and somebody else who can apply and apply your services. So I just wanted to say that the great ideas don't need to come unstuck because you're not eligible. Right, okay. If you've got a great idea and you want to sort of leverage grants, here are some advice I want to give. Now, first of all, do not become grant dependent. I always say look for 3 sources of income, not just grants. There must be 2 other ways to generate income into an organization. Going back to mid-2013, 2014, the federal government changed the structure changed the landscape for many of its community services. I think it took about $3.5 billion worth of grant funding and condensed it into 800 million. And what that meant was things like housing, homelessness, some of the age services, community development, multicultural, all of these social areas were suddenly sort of declined into a smaller bucket. And with the way that the government appeared to deal with it was economies of scale. So local organizations, local to where I live in particular, that had been used to getting the funding to pay their staff and suddenly found that they didn't have a contract anymore because they didn't get the next round of funding. Because as I said, to contract the amount of funding that was available, contract the bucket, they'd gone for economies of scale. So somebody maybe in the metropolitan area had got the contract for the regional areas. So that's how they dealt with it. So I saw many organizations just go out of business just like that, simply because they'd become grant dependent and their staff had come grant dependent. Obviously employing staff was grant dependent as well. So that was a big lesson to be learned. It was learned on the other side as well, because by doing the economies of scale, what the funders hadn't realized was the local knowledge, local expertise, etc., that disappeared, went out the window when the people went out the door. So, a happier balance has been set since then. But it was a radical change, and really saying, look, whatever you do, try and look at different ways to bring in the income, not just relying on a grant, because a grant's got an end date as well. And that's why you should make sure you've got an exit plan or a plan for sustainability. Think about how you can monetize or what you've learned, or monetize something that you've produced. Always think about, what is the next step. So make sure that you just don't finish it. You got this great idea, you get it so far. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I've been working in bushfire recovery, and for 2 or 3 years, when bushfires were sort of like the sort of urgent need, what we found was money was coming and organizations were building their capability to do something. And then the floods came, and focus has moved away into the floods. And that, I'm not saying totally because of that, but it didn't help. What we find was that these new ideas got to a certain point, and that was it. There was no more money. They couldn't take it to the next level. Or if they wanted to say it's going to take 5 years for this outcome, and they got money for 3 years, what happened to the next 2? And this is why it's always important that you evaluate your success, evaluate how you're working for your purpose, because once you've got that information, that evidence base again, and that data, you can then use it to look out there into the big world and say, how else can I generate the income? And I'm going to show you this in a minute. Okay, so the power of data, I cannot underestimate that, is so strong if you want to further your cause and what you're doing. And finally, pay yourself first. I don't mean yourself personally, I mean pay your organization. I should say pay your organization first, not last. And I've seen some charitable causes that have been set up with the whole impetus being 100% is going to go straight to the alleviation of this, and this. We're going to do it 100% volunteers. Somebody out there with their passion, and then after about 2 or 3 years, there's a level of burnout, because the organization itself is an entity. It needs feeding. You can't sort of keep it on starvation rates. So when you are looking for income and grants, build in that managerial stuff, and you can. It's called project management fees. And I've just recently seen a really good examples in a funding guidelines actually explains that. I think it said project management no more than 10%. And then it went to explain what project management was. It didn't mean the project manager and the salaries. It meant the underlying cost across the organization. So they could have put in 10% of the total budget. That 10% helps to sustain the organization. So if you want to grow and to feed your entity, then don't go in there with that mentality of scarcity. Go in there with, I'm going to feed this organization, so we've got a strong foundation so that we can actually grow in the future. Okay, so I'm saying grants are not the only way. And given the example of being 3 years into a 5-year plan, the rug's sort of pulled from underneath you, and what do you do? Well, there's a few things you can do. You can have a look, and this is where we come in as well, helping, is you can look to businesses, look to the corporates, who, as many of them have got their corporate social responsibility statement on their websites. And so they want to give back to the community. So if you can, you know, if what you want to do is maybe in the youth area, and you've got these big boys who are saying we want to give back to youth, etc., maybe that's an opportunity for you to connect with a business to help you to generate gap income or the income. Businesses, yes, they like to work with organisations that got deductible gift recipient status because that helps to get the money back in tax, but it's not always the case. So you can do it for, go at them for the social responsibility. Those that will fund, you know, if you've got deductible gift recipient status, that's great because that's a good, you know, quid pro quo. But also businesses actually might do this as a business activity. So if they can actually have for advertising, so if they can, you know, donate something where they get their advertising materials out there to their target market through what you're doing, then that's an advertising cost. It's got nothing else to do. That's a cost of business. So you can look at businesses. There's something now called B Corps, which are more like sort of social enterprise side of businesses. So there's a growing sort of commitment to giving back to the community. So the whole concept of B Corps is now starting to grow. Donations, you know, if you're an entity that can attract donations, then use that. If you're a business, look for investors. If you're a startup or you're in growth mode, it might not be a grant you need, it might be a mentor. So there's support out there for mentoring. So I'm saying to you, look, there's different ways of generating it. Of course, there might be fee for service activities, things that you're doing that you can generate income in as well. So grants are not the only way. They're a great contribution, as I said, because if you do it right, it takes away the stress of actually looking for the money. But there's other ways to do it as well. Okay, so I just want to quickly, before we sort of finish this presentation, and then what I'm suggesting then is any questions we can sort of go through the questions. But if you want to know more about what we do, we've got a grant writing help desk. Just go to getthatgrant.com and we go through that whole process, and we're evolving it, and we're just about to launch a subscription service. But it's, you know, from the process, where they are, what grants are, where to look. If you want to do it yourself, we've got tools to help you. If you want to engage me, yes, you can find me. And we've also got opportunities for professional development, training, community, etc. And what I'm saying to you, I'm inviting, what I want to do is to invite you to, if it's anything has sparked your interest here, as I said, I've tried to give you examples of what we've done to help leverage and bringing in the money in. You're welcome to book a one-to-one with me. Here is the link, bit.ly/grants booking. Always, you know, great opportunity to have that conversation. And as we finish next time, I've been talking about data here. There's different ways to collect the evidence, not just surveys and focus groups. There's other tools that you can use to get the information that you're looking for. So